Okay, so I want to show you in this video, I want to demonstrate for you some basic manipulations of lists that are very common. Now, what I want to demonstrate here is something called traversing a list. And that means to go through the list starting at the beginning, going through every element until the end, and doing something with that element. So for example, like printing it, or doing a calculation with it, or modifying it in a standard way. So that's a very common operation. You want to go through each piece of data in your list and you want to perform an operation on it or do something with it. So how do we traverse a list? Okay, well, there are several ways. Primarily, we're going to use a for loop. A for loop is a perfect fit for traversing a list because remember, a for loop is a loop that repeats a certain number of times. And in our case, we need it to repeat as many times as there are elements in the list. Okay, so say I have this list right here called my list. It's got a bunch of stuff: fish, steak, chicken, salad, chicken. And so say I want to traverse the list. And let's say I just want to print them out. I just want to print out each item in the list on a separate line by itself. So I want to traverse the list. So the easiest way is to use a for loop in this way. Okay, so now normally I would write a for loop like this, for example. So if I want, for example, if I want a for loop to repeat 10 times, and then I want to print those numbers out, I would probably do something like this. Okay, so if I were to make a loop like this and run it, I would just see on the screen the numbers 0 through 9. So we've seen a for loop in this format. Okay, now it turns out that you can also use a for loop to traverse a list, and there's a slight modification in how we do that. Okay, so instead of saying I in range and then giving how many times I want to repeat, I can do this instead. I can say for some variable, we'll call it, say, X in my list. So I can have my for loop go through each item in my list. And so I can just set it up like this for X in my list. And let's say I just want to print them. Okay, like this. And so slight modification of my for loop, you see in the output console, on the right here, I print out each item in my list on a separate line by itself. Fish, steak, salad, chicken. Okay, so now that's an easy way. Python provides a real easy way for us to traverse a list, to go through our list in order. Okay, now you can even do things like, instead of just printing out the item in the list, I could do some modifications to it. So say I wanted to make it a part of a larger statement. So say I wanted, instead of just to print out each item in the list, I want to add a little phrase to it. So I want to say, for example, fish is an item on the menu, or steak is on the menu, or salad is on the menu. So when I print it out, I can just tack on a little piece like this, and that'll get printed out along with the item from my list. So if I run it, you see that now I have a phrase printed out. Fish is on the menu, steak is on the menu, salad is on the menu, chicken is on the menu. Okay, so I can even do things like that. And if these were, say, numerical values instead of strings or text, say these were numbers, I could have my for loop do some calculations or do some computations with those numbers. Okay, so using a for loop in this way is actually a real powerful way to traverse a list. Okay, now here's a thing. Say I wanted to make, say, like a menu. Say I'm going to make like a text-based menu, and I want to have these as items on the menu that a user can select. So I might want to print, for example, might want to print next to the item. I might want to print, say, like a number, like 1, 2, 3, 4, so that the user can say, oh, I want selection 1, or I want selection 2, I want selection 3, I want number 4. Instead of having to type in the whole word fish or steak or salad or chicken. Okay, so let's take a look at how you might do something like that to set up, say, something like a menu. Okay, now I would need to have some kind of counter, a variable that keeps track of where in the list I am, the position in the list, so that when I print out the item in the list, I can print out that counter also as a way of numbering the item in the list. Okay, so let's take a look at how we do that. So let me take out this little extra piece right here for now. Let me just go back to printing out the item in the list. Okay, so I'm going to make a counter variable. I'm going to call it counter. Now I'm going to start off at 1. So I want my items in my list to start with number 1. So I'm going to start with 1 as my counter. So when I print it out, I want to print out the value of that counter as well. Okay, so in this print statement, I'm going to include the counter along with the item in the list. Okay, now I purposefully am going to set this up so that I want to show you some stuff as we go along. So let's try this out. Let's say I just have a counter. I'm going to start it at 1. I'm going to print it out along with the item in my list. Now, the thing we have to do, though, is once we print it out, we have to change the counter to the next number. It's not going to automatically do it by itself. So I've got to put another statement in here, something like this, counter equals counter plus 1. This will, once I print it out, it'll change it to the next number. It'll add 1 to itself, so it'll change it to the next number. So when I come around and print it out again, it'll be the next number in the sequence. Otherwise, it's just going to keep printing 1, which is not really what we want. Okay, so now watch what happens when I do that. Okay, so I got some red, and this is instructive. I intended that for that to happen, because what happens is we get a syntax error. Okay, so debugging, being able to work through syntax errors, is an important skill in programming. Okay, so if you look at the syntax error, it's going to give you, first of all, it's going to tell you where it happened. So if you look at this, it says line 6. Okay, so we look back at our code at line 6. Oh, okay, that's the print statement. So there must be something wrong with the print statement. Okay, so, and then it kind of gives us a little bit of information else. When you first start debugging, interpreting what these things mean can be a little bit cryptic. It's not going to tell you exactly how to fix it, okay, but it's going to give you some hints. So it says type error, unsupported operand types for plus, int and string. Okay, so essentially what happens is when I try to print this out, counter is a number. It's an integer, whole number, it's a number. Whereas x is a string, a piece of text. And when we're trying to print them together, it doesn't let us mix and match those. It's a little bit confused because numbers, you can add them together. When you put a plus sign with strings, that means stick them together one after the other. That's called concatenation. Okay, so there's a problem there. So we got to fix that. Now, you might wonder, well, before I had something like this. Okay, so before I typed this, and that was okay. The plus sign here was okay. How come that worked and then now this has a problem? Okay, well, it's because both x, the item in the list that I'm on, and this other piece is on the menu, this other piece here, these are both strings. They're both pieces of text, bits of text. So if they're the same type of thing, they're both numbers or they're both bits of text, then this is okay. But as soon as I try to mix and match, so try to combine a number with a piece of text, okay, like how I'm doing now, then it's going to throw a fit. It doesn't like that. Okay, so we gotta somehow make it so that these two are both the same type of data. They're both either strings or numbers. Now we can't convert a piece of text like steak. We can't really convert that to a number. That doesn't make sense. So the other thing we have to do is we have to then convert this number into a string. Okay, and I think you've seen this function before when we did code HS. This was a part of some of the syntax that we learned. If you use the function str for string, that will convert the number to a string, a bit of text. It'll treat it as if it's a piece of text, a random piece of text, and then you can combine it with the item from your list. So if we try that now, let's see what happens. So hopefully that clears up the red. Yeah. So now you take a look at it. 1 fish, 2 steak, 3 salad, 4 chicken. Okay, so we got our menu. Not real happy with that though. It's kind of it's not really attractive. It's kind of hard to read. So let's see if we can just kind of fix that up a little. Maybe what we'll do is maybe we'll try this. So maybe we'll put some grouping symbol, so maybe like a bracket around that number. So I'll put in these other bits of text. I can combine them together because they're all bits of text strings. So say I do something like that. Maybe let's put a space after that closing bracket, just to make it a little bit nicer formatted. Okay, so let's try run that. Okay, that's a little bit better. See how now we have our menu. So there's fish is number 1, steak is number 2, salad number 3, chicken 4. And it's easy to read, nicely formatted. So I'm happy with that. Okay, so here's how you can use for loops in lists. Kind of neat how we can do that. So now we have kind of the beginnings of being able to make a program that's interactive. We can make a menu. So if I have a list of options and I want a user to choose from that list of options, I can present it to the user in a way that's going to make sense and it's going to be easy for them to select. So you want to make things as easy for your user as possible. If you give them a menu of choices, you don't want them to have to type in, okay, which one do you want? Oh, I have to type in F-I-S-H, fish. Okay, that's kind of clunky. The easier way is to give them a numbered option. They can just type in a number. Okay, so this is how you traverse a list in Python. Use a for loop, slightly modified for loop from the way we had it before, but essentially kind of the same. For something in your list, for some variable in your list, and then inside your list, you can do whatever you want with that variable. And what it'll do is it'll just traverse your list. Start at the beginning, go to the next one, next one, next one, all the way until the end, and then do something with that data. So whether it's print it, or whether you want to do a computation or whatever you want to do, you can traverse your list.